Blessings, blessings, blessings be of it. We are back. I am Mama Pam, aka Pamela Dobson of the SMRF Family International Interactive Ministry, where we read the Word of God 7 minutes every day so you don't have to read. SMRF does stand for something. SMRF, SMRF Family, stands for 7 Minute Read Family, 7 Minute Read Followers. We just have 7 Minute Read Faithful Folk, because the people come one time, they get hooked, and they just keep on coming back to enjoy the Lord with me in reading of the Word of God, because that's what's going to keep us. That's how we can be informed. That's how we understand what's going on today in the world today. It's right here in the Word. Everything that's going on over in Israel is in the Word of God. So we're doing Jeremiah, the 48th chapter, verses 39, resuming on verse 39. Reading from enduringword.com, enduringword.com. Now, we have heard of the pride of Moab. There was a lot to say about the pride of Moab. God described it as exceedingly proud, as loftiness and arrogance and pride, and as haughtiness of his heart. Jeremiah here piles up a number of synonymous terms designed to emphasize Moab's pride. I know his wrath. Moab's pride was also connected to their wealth, to their wrath or anger. Believing themselves to be better than others, they found it easy to feel and act in an angry manner. God knew that it is not right. Their pride explained their anger, but it did not justify it. Therefore, I will wail for Moab. Even though the judgment was richly deserved, it was not rejoiced in. God and his prophet would cry out and mourn because of the destruction to come upon Moab and her people. Joy and gladness are taken from the plentiful field. So Moab's previous prosperity in the field and the winepress would turn to sorrow and desolation. This would happen all over the land of Moab. Their idol sacrifices on the high places would stop. No one will tread with joyous shouting. So Jeremiah 48:33 is a variant of Isaiah 16:10. The implication is that the shout will not be the glad cry of the vintagers, but the noise of warriors bent on destruction. Like a 3-year-old heifer, which runs lowing from place to place in search of her calf, which is lost or taken away. Verses 36 through 42. Therefore my heart shall wail like flutes for Moab. God and his prophet did not celebrate the coming doom upon Moab. Though they deserved the judgment, it was still painful to see it come upon Israel's cousin and neighbor. Every head shall be bald and every beard clipped. Jeremiah recounted their many demonstrations of mourning, including ritual cutting. On all the hands shall be cuts, and the wearing of sackcloth. I've broken Moab like a vessel in which is no pleasure. Clay pots or vessels were cheaply made in the ancient world. When the use of pleasure of a pot had ended, it was quickly and easily broken. This was a picture of God's judgment would come upon Moab. It would be so bad that men would show the pain and fear of a woman in labor of birth. One shall fly like an eagle. So the eagle ready to swoop on its prey was an apt figure of Nebuchadnezzar. Deuteronomy 28:49, Jeremiah 49:22. Moab shall be destroyed as a people. The people of Moab would no longer continue as a separate defined people. In a sense, they would be lost to history, unlike Israel. All this came because he exalted himself against the Lord. Moab's predicted extinction began with a heavy Nabatean settlement in the 1st century BC and culminated under the Arabs in the Byzantine period. The end of Moab as an independent nation seems to have come in 582 BC. when Nebuchadnezzar, no doubt, because of a rebellion, marched against Moab and Ammon. Not long after this, the small states in Transjordan were overwhelmed by an Arab invasion and ceased to exist as a nation. Verses 43 through 47. God promised that the judgment to come upon Moab would be thorough. If someone escaped an aspect of it, another aspect of the judgment would catch up with them. Thompson observed on Jeremiah 48, 45 through 46 that it would appear that these verses consist of free quotations from the old Song of Hesbon, which occurs in Numbers 21, 28, 29, and also from Numbers 34, 17. You may see in these words a claim that Balaam's oracles against Moab was about to be enacted. Yet, I will bring back the captives of Moab. So despite the complete nature of the judgment to come against them, God promised a measure of mercy for Moab in the latter days. Perhaps the restoration spoken of here, which was to take place in the latter days, may mean the conversion of these people in their existing remnants to the faith of the gospel. Several judicious interpreters are of this opinion. The Moabites were partially restored, but never, as far as I have been able to learn, to their national consequences. Their conversion to the Christian faith must be the main end designed by this prophecy, that they will all eventually, someday, be believers in Jesus Christ. Or else, Jeremiah 49, we will go through 49. What did we go through? I said 30 something. 49. Look in my Bible, y'all. 18. 49, 1 through 18. Put in my little handy dandy book here. All right. Reading from enduringword.com, commentary, enduringword.com. And we are in Jeremiah 49. Words of judgment against the nation, against the Ammonites. Now, the Ammonites lived in the area on the east side of the Jordan River, north of the Moabites. Their land was included in what is today's Jordan. And the capital of Jordan is named Ammon because of this connection. The Ammonites were often in conflict with Israel. They opposed Judah during Jehoiakim's reign, 2 Kings 25:2, and helped the downfall of the remnant after the fall of Jerusalem, Jeremiah 40:11 and 14. They joined in the invasion of Judah in 602 BC. Now, has Israel no sons? Has he no heir? Why then does Milcom inherit Gad? Through Jeremiah, God spoke of the fact that the Ammonites occupied land that was a proportion for the tribes of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh. In the name of their God, Milcom, they lived in that land, acting as if Israel's inheritance was invalid. Not today. So in God's estimation, that land belonged to Israel, not Ammon. Although the northern tribes had been carried away by the Tiglath-Pileser III, their land still belonged to them and was to be inherited by their sons. The Ammonites, it appears, took advantage of the depressed state of Israel and invaded their territories in the tribe of Gad, hoping to make them their own forever. But the prophet intimates that God will preserve the descendants of Israel and will bring them back to their fortified inheritances. We could say that there is a similar wonder today when God's people forsake their inheritance and do not possess it. Under the new covenant, the believer has an inheritance of peace and power and love in Jesus. It's our inheritance to actually possess it. Milcom, better known to us as Molech, had been worshipped here with rites of child sacrifice since before the days of Moses. The mention of this God as the invader at the heads of his people. Jeremiah 49:1 puts the matter on a plane above the political. Verses 2-3. I will cause to be heard an alarm of war. So God promised that the same devastation of war that came upon Judah would also come upon the Ammonites. Their great cities like Rabbah would be made a desolate mount. Ai is not the Ai captured by Joshua in Joshua 8:1-29, but the Ammonite Ai mentioned only here. Then Israel shall take possession of his inheritance. God promised a day when Israel would possess these lands on the eastern side of the Jordan River. It can be argued that this prophecy is yet to be fulfilled. How Israel would repossess these areas is not clear. Historically, this did not take place. Milcom shall go into captivity. The Babylonians would not only conquer the land and the peoples of the Ammonites, but also their national deity, Milcom, together with his priests and princes. Remember, Milcom, again, is that idol god. In the ancient world, when one nation conquered another, it was seen as a victory of that nation's gods over the conquered nation's gods. There's much in the prophets and the Hebrew scriptures in general that shows God, the covenant God of Israel, carefully showed that he was not just the national deity of Israel. He was and is the king of all the earth. When Babylon conquered Ammon, one might say the Babylonian idols were superior. When Babylon conquered Judah, it was at the very direction of God whose purpose the Babylonians served. Verses 4-6. Why do you boast in the valleys? So the Ammonites believed that geography would help defend them against the Babylonians, but it was a poorly placed trust. The same could be said as they trusted in their treasuries. All would fail them in the days of judgment. I will bring fear upon you. The day of judgment would be marked by fear and captivity. You shall be driven out. Wherein a century the Arabian tribes that overran Moab and Ammon would have driven the Edomites out of their land into the south of Judah, and these invaders would be replaced in turn by the power kingdom of Nabateans. But afterwards, I will bring back. So in the midst of judgment, God had mercy and some promise of restoration, even for the Ammonites. The Ammonites were supposed to have returned with the Moabites and Israelites on permission given by the Edict of Cyrus. The promise of some kind of restoration for other nations shows God's mercy and plan extends past Israel. He saw also that the ultimate purpose of the activity of wrath is that of restoration, not in the case of Israel only, but also in that of all nations. The fact for some of these nations no such restoration is foretold reveals the awful possibility of resisting not only the mercy of God, but his judgment also, so completely that there is no possibility of restoration. Judgment against Edom. Judgment against Edom, verses 7-8. The Edomites were also a cousin nation to Israel. Their founder was Esau, the son of Isaac, twin brother of Jacob. They also lived in the land east of the Jordan River and the Dead Sea, toward the south mountains and deserts. Edom's cardinal sin was its pride, manifested in its unrelenting and violent hatred of Israel, and its rejoicing in her misfortune. Obadiah 3:10-14. There's no prophecy of future restoration for Edom. So when Judah felt the weight of Nebuchadnezzar in 589 and 587, Edom not only gave assistance, but seems to have collaborated with the Babylonians. Ezekiel 25:12-14, Psalms 137:7, Obadiah, Lamentations 4:21. Is wisdom no more in Teman? Part of God's judgment against the Edomites was to bring them foolish and incompetent leadership. To this day, This is one way God may show his displeasure against a nation. Teman was either a district or a city of Edom, but here it is a poetic name for Edom. The reference to wisdom in Teman may be a satirical literary allusion to the fact that it was the birthplace of Eliphaz, the counselor of Job. Dwell in the depths. This has occasionally been a preacher's verse, especially as given in the King James. Dwell deep. Preachers have found in this an encouragement for believers to dwell deep in God. This is always a good and valid encouragement, but not where Jeremiah had in mind. He told the Edomites to dig in deep, as a soldier does in a foxhole or trench, trying to find some shelter against the judgment to come. Hide yourselves in holes of the earth, grouts in the ground, clefts of the rocks, where you may best secure yourself from the pursuing enemy. This may be taken sarcastically, daring Dedan to go deep enough to avoid the judgment of God. This may be taken as instruction, warning Dedan to escape the judgment coming upon Edom. As originally spoken, these words summon the people of Edom to seek the shadows of impenetrable forests and retire into the secrecy of the caves and the dens of the rocks. The deeper their hiding place, the better it would be when the storm of invasion swept across the land. F.B. Meyer went on to make spiritual applications to the believer. Dwell deep in the peace of God. Dwell deep in communion with God, and dwell deep in the stillness of your soul. O inhabitants of Dedan. Dedan in Jeremiah 49:8. A tribe living south of Edom was known for its commerce. Jeremiah 25:23, Ezekiel 25:13. The people of Dedan are warned to flee from their usual contacts with Edom, lest they be overtaken in its destruction. I will bring the calamity of Esau upon you. The calamity of Esau refers to Esau's sense that he lost everything when the birthright was given to Jacob. God promised that the Edomites would also feel that they lost everything when judgment came against them. Verses 9 through 11. Would they not leave some gleaning grapes? In normal times, it's common for people to leave some things behind and not take everything. It was generally true for a grape harvest and even when in a house is robbed. Yet, when God came against Edom in judgment, he would make Esau bare. All would be taken, everything. Contrary to the practice of grape gatherers, who left something for the poor, the enemies of Edom would leave nothing, but will plunder everything. Leave your fatherless children, for I will preserve them alive. Here was a glimmer of hope for Edom. Even with the devastation to come, God invited the remnant remaining, made up of fatherless children and widows, to trust in him. Verses 12 through 16. We go to 32. Ye shall drink of it. The mountainous and wilderness terrain of Edom gave them many natural advantages, and they proudly thought that they would escape the judgment that came upon Judah and the surrounding nations. God assured them that they would, in fact, drink of his cup of judgment, and Edom's cities shall be a perpetual waste. The Edomites had long enjoyed a reputation for rugged military strength, but their trust in the physical prowess would fail them at the critical moment. Bozrah shall become a desolation. Now, Bozrah is referred to because it was the capital of Edom in Jeremiah's time. It was midway between Petra and the Dead Sea, and here it represents all the Edomite cities. Isaiah 63:1. An ambassador has been sent to the nations. Jeremiah and other prophets were consciously prophets to the nations, not only to God's covenant people in Judah and Israel. Your fierceness has deceived you, O you who dwell in the cliffs of the rock. Edom's trust in the courage Edom's trust in the courage of their soldiers and their defensive Their defensible territory would be broken. They thought of themselves as high and safe as the eagle. Yet God promised to bring you down from there. Your fierceness has deceived you. The unusual noun in Jeremiah 49:16, tipset, may be a derogatory substitute for one of Edom's deities. The cliffs of the rock, referred to was later called Selah, the capital city and fortress of Edomites. 17 to 22. Edom also shall be an astonishment. Our other nations noticed the many advantages Edom had in self-defense. They would also be astonished by the judgment that came upon those they believed were secure, as in the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah. These were chosen as warnings, not only for the complete nature of the devastation that came upon them, but also because they were in the region of later Edom. So the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighboring cities was so terrible that when God denounces judgments against incorrigible sinners, he tells them they shall be like Sodom and Gomorrah. That's pretty bad to go down in history. It's just like Sodom and Gomorrah, a sin-filled city full of sin. I had to destroy it. He should come up like a lion from the floodplain of the Jordan. This described Nebuchadnezzar, who would come against Edom, the dwelling place of the strong. In God's great providence, Nebuchadnezzar with his instrument. So in that sense, God could even equate resisting Nebuchadnezzar to be as foolish as resisting God. Who will withstand me? God says. He shall come up and fly like the eagle. So the people of Eden thought of themselves as secure as an eagle. Jeremiah 49:16. God promised that he would conquer over them like a mighty eagle, and they would respond in pain and fear, like the heart of a woman in birth pangs. 23:24. Against Damascus. So this is the famous city of Syria, one of Israel's neighbors to the north. Damascus is one of the oldest continually occupied cities of the world. There's trouble on the sea. So the reference to the sea, Jeremiah 49:23, must be figurative because Syria had no sea coast in ancient times. Suggestions as to the meaning are relentless or trouble. Damascus has grown feeble. In comparison to the might of the rising Babylonian Empire, Damascus was weak and feeble. They could not stand against the coming judgment and would respond in pain and sorrow. Verses 25 through 27. Why is the city of praise not deserted? So God gave honor to this ancient city, even calling it the city of his joy. He noted that it would not be deserted a population like other major cities of surrounding nations. All men of war shall be cut off. They would suffer great defeat and death, and even the palaces of Ben-Hadad would be burned. Yet they would not be exiled in the same manner as Judah and some of the neighboring nations. The young men and the warriors are identical. They would fall in the city streets and lie silent on the day of judgment. Perhaps the greatest fulfillment of this is still in the future. Expositors have difficulty fitting this prophecy into any recorded event related to Damascus. Chapter 38, against Kedar. Now Kedar describes a tribe of Arab people, descendants from Ishmael. Genesis 25:13. Isaiah prophesied against Kedar as among Arabic peoples. Isaiah 21:13 through 17. Kedar was an Ishmaelite desert tribe. Genesis 25:13, Isaiah 21:13, 16, and Ezekiel 27:21. Kings of Hazar. So the kingdoms of some English version is better rendered village chief. and against the kingdoms of Hazar. This is likely not the Canaanite city conquered by Joshua. A more likely connection is with Judges 4, describing how Deborah defeated Sisera, the commander of the armies of Jabin, king of Hazor, in Judges 4. Some expositors believe it was an Arab settlement in the south of Palestine. Sokals, others take it as a collective name for villages in which half nomadic Arabs live, Isaiah 42:11. Kedar and Hazar represents the Arab peoples, the former such as were nomadic, the latter those who dwelt in settled centers and yet not in walled cities. Some regard the men of the East as an additional group. A third group, the people of the East, is known in other parts of the Old Testament. These people are associated with Midianites and Amalekites in Judges 6 and 3, nomadic groups who raided Israelites' territory in the days of the Judges. 29:33, conquest and plunder. Their tents and their flocks they shall take away. In God's plan, Nebuchadnezzar would conquer Kedar. They would take the wealth of the nomadic herdsmen's lives, tents and their flocks, their curtains, all their vessels, and all their camels. This description of property shows that they were Sinite or nomad Arabs, perhaps who dwell in tents and whose principal property was cattle, especially camels, of the whole of which they were plundered by the Chaldeans. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has taken counsel against you. God gave a similar warning to Hazar, which was a wealthy nation, yet would be conquered, plundered, and left a desolation forever. That concludes our read for today. We read up to judgment against Elam. That's where we will resume tomorrow. And that is Jeremiah, the 49th chapter. We will resume there tomorrow. Again, I want to say thank you for those of you who continue to come on my YouTube channel and continue to support. If you want to be a financial blessing, you can go to www.7minuteread.com, www.7minuteread.com. On that page, you will find a safe donation button, And if you don't want to be a financial blessing, that's okay. You ain't got to, but you can. We have 129 of you that could go to my YouTube page. You can subscribe, you can thumbs up, and you can share to the share. Just share it like you don't care. Until tomorrow, I see you. Somebody named Tyriel Freeson Moore. Blessings. I see you back there on the YouTube. Gotta go back to my big old platform. See you then.